Welcome to the Hidden Truth Show. We are embarking on a deep dive into AA's 12-step program. It's called AA Kills. You're going to see an excerpt from our interview with Mike Pond. Mike Pond was a psychotherapist who had an alcohol problem. He lost his practice, he lost his home, he lost his family, and he wound up homeless. He turned to his 12-step program, and it didn't work. Ultimately, he found redemption, and he found a way out of his alcoholism, and now runs his own treatment program and says that he thinks that the 12-step programs are letting people down. So you're going to see an excerpt of my interview with Mike Pond. He's the author of Wasted, an alcoholic therapist's fight for recovery in a flawed treatment system. Also with him is his girlfriend who produced his documentary. Her name is Maureen Palmer. So are you on any medication for depression or that type of thing?
No.
But this man went and took ayahuasca in the jungle of Mexico about 2 years ago. I have seen a profound personality change since then.
That's a whole other show.
Well, I'm familiar with the medication ayahuasca, famously provided mostly in Peru, right? And people go there to take it. Not really. It's a hallucinogen, I believe, right? But it's not really something that you do socially. People really do it with a particular intent in mind to try to address something deep-seated in them, including addiction.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was, through the years, I was noticing that the use of the psychedelic-assisted work, or the psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies, and I just got really curious. And Dr. Gabor Mate, we met him because he reviewed our book in the Toronto Globe and Mail, and I knew that he was using ayahuasca, right, and with his client, his patients, and out of Mexico, and that's when he invited me down to Mexico, and I did the ayahuasca and came back, because according to Maureen, a different person.
His edge is greatly diminished.
I miss my edge.
In a good way. And the intensity and the ability to just be at peace and enjoy the life that he has now, as opposed to being burdened by regrets from the period of the deep alcoholism. It's made him a happier human.
Well, we don't need to do a whole show on it, but just to do a couple more minutes on it.
Yeah.
What were you focusing on when you did the ayahuasca?
And that, what you said earlier is crucial, right? You need to have intention, right? So when you start these treatments or journeys, as the shamans call them, you need to come into it with intention. So that's the set, right? What is my mindset? Where am I at emotionally with this thing, and what do I want to achieve? And I went in with an intention, a very simple one, just like, help me deal with my shame, right? Because even after all these years, and then of course after the relapse that I had, when we began filming, I had, all of that debilitating shame came right back in, and I went, oh man. And so I just went in with that intention. And then, so you look at the substance, right, the medicine or whatever you call it, plant medicine, then you look at the set, what is my mindset, my intention, and the setting. And the setting needs to be a therapeutic setting, right? This isn't about recreational, I'm going to get high and have fun and trip out, right? It really is about, healing and positive change.
Yeah, it's not a fun drug.
Oh, it's not a fun drug.
Now hernia surgery after it from all the puking.
Right.
Ruptured a hernia.
Right. But you could theoretically go back and do it again and perhaps address childhood trauma with it, right?
I have. Yeah, I've gone back and done other ayahuasca ceremonies, and as well psilocybin assisted. So a lot of the psychedelic assisted work I'm quite involved in now, because I'm just seeing these remarkable outcomes, right?
You're probably reaching things in the brain that, it's just you can't reach on a conscious level. It reminds me of this EMDR. You guys familiar with this?
Yes, I use it in my practice.
Oh, great. Well, let's talk about EMDR, because we've talked about that on the show before in our transgender deep dive, and how therapists are using it to address childhood trauma. So
That's why I listened to that.
Pardon me?
I listened to that episode.
Oh, good. So are you using it as a treatment for addiction?
Yeah, and I've been using EMDR for years. I mean, even before all of this happened to me, I've been I've been a certified EMDR therapist for 25 years, so it's been a big part of my practice because
25 years.
Trauma.
It's been around it's been around that long.
Oh yeah. Francine Shapiro was the psychologist that developed it. It's got to be 30 years ago at least now. So it's been around a long time.
And was it mostly for PTSD?
They initially used it for the war vets, right? The Vietnam War vets, to treat them, and now it's kind of become much more broad and generalist in terms of. I use it for everything now.
So in your practice, what do you give as a ballpark percentage success rate with with EMDR?
This isn't science, but I would go like 70%. It's pretty high, right? Because people that try to deal with an addiction, right, it's the 12-step, it's these other kind of standard cognitive behavioral approaches, and so they've never really experienced what I call a deeper therapeutic technique. And so they come into this thing, okay, I'll typically what I do is say, what I'd like you to do, I suggest you do is construct what I call a trauma timeline. And so you walk through your entire life from your earliest memory to today, and just start to write down everything that you experienced that you know had a negative impact on you, or you believe had hurts, losses, abuses, neglects, being bullied at school, anything, right? And so the person goes through that process of writing it. I call it peeling away the layers of the onion. They think about it, then they actually go, oh my God, yeah, that was traumatic. And then they pen to paper, that's another layer. And then they bring me in my office and we go through it, right? And that's another layer of processing. And then I take each incident, right? And then I do an EMDR treatment with it. And EMDR is eye movement, and the key piece is desensitization and reprocessing. So the desensitization is bringing down disturbance, right? Taking away all that disturbance from it. And the reprocessing is changing my experience of it, changing how I think, feel, and behave about it, right? And that's key. And people experience tremendous relief. And when they start to resolve a lot of this stuff or bring resolution to a lot of the trauma, it really starts to diminish the desire and need for substances.
And for the people who didn't listen to my prior show, this is instigating some type of rapid eye movement that supposedly resets left brain, right brain?
Yeah, it's called bilateral processing because in the brain, because typically we process one hemisphere and it kind of goes back, seesaws back and forth, right? But the eye movements, the theory is that the brain, it's a deep level of processing because the brain is processing with both hemispheres simultaneously. And so you're really doing a deep level of processing in the brain.
So you seem to be a great candidate for EMDR. Did you ever consider getting EMDR treatment back when you were having your issues?
I didn't. One was I thought I was okay.
I don't need it. Those guys need it. But isn't that amazing? You know, because you're sitting here today and you're talking about significant childhood traumas, and you're treating people with childhood traumas.
But after the documentary, Michael did subsequently end up going for trauma counseling, including EMDR.
EMDR, right? Yeah. And no, I did the EMDR when I did the training. I was a certified level 2, which means, you know, I can teach it or instruct it. But we had to go through a lot of it ourselves, right? That's just part of the training. And so I had EMDR, but not in the context of me dealing with my trauma and how it was connected to my alcohol use.
When you were at the height of your alcohol abuse, were you able to be self-analytical and determine, you know, why am I this way? Were you thinking about that?
Constant. It was constantly on my mind. Right? I'd be in session, and I often say I used to feel sorry for the last 2 or 3 clients of the day, because by about 3-4 o'clock, I'm like thinking about drinking and wanting my drink, and that's where my mind would go. And so it kind of pulled me out of you know, that engagement, right, that I have with my clients, my patients.
We'll have to send you a copy of the book, because even while we wrote the book, Mike documented during the worst of his demise his own mental health status exams. Yeah. He'd end up doing like, what's the overall assessment of function, like 30 out of 100.
Yeah, it's called the mental status exam, and it's just a kind of a classic kind of way of doing mental status on somebody. And at the end, there's what's called the global assessment of functioning, GAF score, 0 to 100. And I would be measuring where my functioning was all the time and kind of gauging my own mental state. And even when I was, floridly psychotic, paranoid, and hearing voices, and I was still able to somehow articulate, right, what was going on here with me. And it was, sometimes insight can be a curse, because I knew I was, going crazy and
couldn't do anything.
So crazy and couldn't do anything about it, and wasn't getting the help that I required. In fact, when I was in that state, I was kind of ridiculed, right, in one of the recovery homes I was in, and I saw that a lot, that people that were suffering that were perceived as kind of weak, right, and vulnerable. And there's this whole other dynamic that happens in a lot of treatment programs and recovery houses around that. And if you read the book, and I really
we're going to send you
we're going to send you a copy. One of the young men that was being ridiculed and bullied in one of the recovery houses ended up hanging himself on the child swing that was in the backyard of this house, and we all went out and tried to revive him, and that's when it's like a switch in my brain. It was like, I got to do something about this. This is absolutely horrible that this is happening, right?
Well, even Mike was in a government-run treatment program for a while, and he went out on a pass and drank after, I guess, 4 weeks or 3 weeks. And the group conscience met, like the whole group that he was part of, and they decided to kick him out.
What other, life-threatening condition would you be kicked out of treatment, right?
Yeah.
By the other patients.
And he's only alive today because a couple walking their dog. We don't get snowstorms, but there was frequent snowstorms that year, and he should be dead because he was found frozen half to death on a beach. And that's because he got kicked out of treatment.
A bottle of scotch.
Treatment should mean when you have the disorder is getting worse, more treatment, not kicked out of treatment.
Yeah.
And this, I think in a lot of treatments centers, probably 80 to 90%, it still functions very much on that group mentality.
Mm-hmm. It's that abstinence only model, right? And that's one of the big problems, is attacking this thing with, you need to be abstinent, and you need to be abstinent today, and you need to stay abstinent for the rest of your life. In fact, your success is going to be measured by your term of sobriety. And to me, that's insane.
And you go off at once, and it resets. So all the pride that you've built in yourself, that you've been able to stay clean for X amount of time, and then you slip up one time, and guess what? Throw all that out the window because you can no longer say, I've been sober for X amount of time.
Yeah.
And so no wonder people don't come back, right? Because it's humiliating. You come back into those rooms with your tail between your legs. I mean, they say welcome back and all that, but, implicitly there's this shame dynamic that's happening. It's just part of it because, again, your status is measured by your term of sobriety.
But to be fair, not all rooms.
No.
There is a significant number of AA meetings that we've attended. Some were completely very loving and very compassionate.
Yeah.
But then there were many groups that Mike attended where you could even hear the guys smoking outside after the meeting saying things like,
we knew he was going to go out. He's going to die. And
he's just one of those guys that's got to keep doing it. He'll never learn. That's sort of all-knowing. And I actually even heard that kind of talk from one of British Columbia's addiction medical doctors, that there was a level of arrogance in the, I know this way is the way to go, and I know it so fervently, I'm going to insist all of my patients learn it that way too. Even the so-called medical addictions expert that Mike saw, Mike never heard of the word naltrexone.
I'm in the business, and I'd never heard of the use of naltrexone for an alcohol use disorder, and using gabapentin, right, as a way of reducing cravings and helping with that restlessness and the agitation and the anxiety and helping us sleep. Man, when you're trying to quit booze and you go off booze, sleep just goes out the window because that's been your sedative for years, right? And you take that away, and most of us, it's one of the biggest problems. And sleep is number one. If you're not getting sleep, the whole rest of the system is going to crumble.
Describe that mentality that causes you to be down to pawning a laptop, as you point out in the documentary, for $20 on the street just to go be able to get a couple beers.
So help me out with this. Like, how would I articulate that?
Well, in the book we tried a few times, right? It's so pervasive, it's so all-consuming that all other rational thought disappears. Not your career, not your kids, not your wife at the time. Yeah. Everything is focused on.
See, the brain actually, there's certain people that in this field that they say the brain actually believes that it's starving to death. If it doesn't get that substance, it's going to die. And so the brain is driving that, right? And yes, there's a choice element to this. I'm the guy that actually has to pick up that bottle and put it to my mouth and drink it. But when I saw my brain scans at the Medical University of South Carolina, and I hadn't had a drink for over 5 years, and I had no conscious awareness, right? Because I had to respond to these images. They were flashing these random images of liquor, right? Different forms of alcohol and beer and wine and hard liquor. And I had this device in my hand that I could measure kind of my craving. And I kept going, nothing. Came out of there going, well, that was easy. But, the brain scan said my brain was very excited. It was wanting that alcohol, and I had no conscious awareness of it.
Well, something I liken it to, but thank God I haven't had an addiction, but I'm curious if you kind of agree with this, that I just know when I'm sick, and you're in bed sick, nothing matters but feeling better. You could think, sex, this, that, the other, travel, nothing matters. You just want to feel better. And I'm just thinking that is that how you would kind of describe the mindset of an addict?
Perfect analogy, right? Because you are sick, right? You got the flu or whatever you've got, but withdrawal is horrendous, right? It's horrendous, and those first few days in particular, it's really tough. And so, how do you stop that? How do you, that's the medicine. It's the poison and the medicine at the same time, right? And I wanted my medicine.
If you enjoyed that interview, go listen to the Hidden Truth Show podcast. The Hidden Truth Show podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, to hear my entire interview with Mike Pond and Maureen Palmer.